Welcome to episode 797 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and of course, with me on this wonderful, wonderful Thursday, Friday, if you're seeing or hearing this, is Diego Larin of D-Spot and Turtles y Tacticas. And Diego, all right, your turn for your introduction. I think we've got this thing where, I'm on my thing with my audience, you're on your thing with your audience, but I also noticed that I've gotten a few notes from my audience that like, hey, Dan, if you're going to stop talking on the watch along, I'm going to go over and watch post game with Diego. So we've had a little bit of cross pollination on match days, which is kind of what this whole collaboration is about.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Listen, welcome to D-Spot. D-Spot, of course, for Barça fans, once again with this collaboration with Dan from the Barcelona pod. And listen, I really enjoy the watch-alongs. I tuned in yesterday briefly while watching the game. I actually have my family from the U.S. over. We were 10 people, and I tuned in quickly. And, those watch-alongs, man, like it's just something that I can't muster up consistently. Like you do those consistently. You do them for every match, right, Dan?
Yeah, on Big Up. Yeah, I mean, thank you
On
for
Big Up, you do it every single time.
We did
Much respect, man.
Well, yesterday too, and I'll probably have this either on the channel or the Patreon, the halftime, and I appreciate Encore and T-Men's coming on with me. We did a big tactical breakdown using the tactics board over on Big Up for that. Was one of the features they have. And that was actually, I think that's where we're going to start because, you and I actually, I want to kind of reiterate some of those things there that we talked about at halftime. Because looking after Eric Garcia went down and Araujo comes on at the bench, tactically, obviously that match, I think the big story is it's 2-2, and yet they get the stoppage time penalty again to make it 3-2. Then you blinked, second half, it's 7-2, right? And the match is over. So really the story to me is from 2-2, or really from 3-2 because of the penalty to 7-2. That's that interim period, right? The second half, the first 15, 20 minutes of the second half, that really is the story of the game. And in that story, and I think this is where we talked about on the tactics board, and I want to again go over with you again right now, is that Hansi Flick, looking at that bench, yes, there was Ferran Torres, yes, there was Olmo, yes, there was Xavi Aspar, and obviously the players that we saw later in the game. But truly, and we knew this, the result and the change, whatever was going to have to happen, was going to have to happen with the 11 on the field at that time. They were going to have to go back and start the second half basically with the same 11, not basically, but with the same 11. Hansi Flick was not going to change anything radically. So how could you tinker with the exact same players on the field and have something better? Because I think so often, us sitting at home go, well, if you use this player, this will change this because this is a different profile. So you're looking to do something different. But how do you tweak things when you've got the same assortment of players? And that's what Hansi Flick did. And it could be for me, I mean, I don't know. I want to know your opinion about it, but it was kind of twofold where very much like almost every other team has done in the second half of games against Barcelona in the Camp Nou since they returned. This is the first 7 years later knockout for Barcelona at the Camp Nou, but very much like all the other teams this season at the Camp Nou, in the second half, the press is slowed. No matter how good they've been, no matter how much they've run Barcelona down, that being Barcelona, have kind of ground teamed in the ground in the second half of games. But that's kind of not an excuse because they came out flat in the second half as opposed to, slowing down around the 60th or 70th minute. No, Newcastle came out flat and Barcelona found space better. So I know what I saw. I'll reiterate that. But what did you see?
Yeah, I think, when it came to sort of the core strategy, I think it remained the same despite the forced substitution for with Araujo coming in for Eddie Garcia. But the second half really, we saw, it featured more fluidity, I would say, like the positional play that dismantled Newcastle's defensive shape was hugely affected by the Barça players sort of rotating and also forcing this kind of man-to-man marking from Newcastle, spreading them out, therefore creating more spaces that, of course, Rafinha, I think, took a lot of advantage of by their sort of fake runs, quick passes as well, that enabled then Fermin to attack open spaces. And we saw Lewandowski also act as a bit of a decoy, I guess you could say. Lewandowski that was still relatively quiet, but certainly critical in his finishes and his movements as well, by dragging defenders away, opening up the spaces, like I said, for Fermin, who scored Barca's second goal. And I mean, I don't know. Like, I think we might have seen the best second half for Barca. And I don't want to take anything away from the first half neither. I feel that overall, the impression that I got from the press and sort of the main podcast that I listened to, the Barça podcast, the day after, so today, going over the game, we're very negative on the first half of a Barça and very positive on the second half. I felt that the game was very entertaining in the first half. It probably wasn't with the best Barças that we have seen so far. I thought that Newcastle did good in responding to the goals that they conceded from Barça. I thought that we looked very comfortable when the first goal went in. I kind of felt like this was going to be a fun day at the park, you know, at the Spotify Camp Nou. And I was quite surprised by Newcastle's ability to hang in there and stay in the game. But that second half, man, like I said, I mean, I guess this is a question for you. Do you think that we witnessed potentially the best half of Barça so far this season?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. And yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that, because I don't know. I think it was a mistake that Newcastle made in terms of their setup that I think other teams may not necessarily do. That'll kind of do them well. Now you mentioned the two Newcastle goals. I want to get negative for a second here, because those Newcastle goals were really, really easy as to how they were scored. They were scored with a back post runner, and that third man run, overloading.
Lamin's fault.
Well, obviously the back heel isn't great, and then on the first goal, he winds up not pressing Lewis Hall, so that winds up being a numerical overload on. It was on the left side, and then again it's a free man at the back post, because either Gerard Martin didn't pick up, or more importantly, Cancelo wasn't tracking back. It wasn't goal side to the man. So the goals for Newcastle looked really simple and repeatable by other teams. So that would be my issue. And so I think I was a bit frustrated, because when I'm watching the post-game stuff here in the US, a lot of those pundits, again, when we talk about, you know, watching on the studio shows, they've got 30 seconds or a minute and a half to break something down. So what do you think they say? They say, Barca's high line, they play with fire.
Yeah.
I just don't see how they can keep enough goals out, and this isn't, it's not repeatable that you can continue to outscore or whatever. But the problem with that thought is that it is repeatable, though. Like the way that Hansi Flick does play, and his line of confrontation, again, does create the opportunities and the chances for them to score 7. And I thought they could have even scored 9 in that game, because again, we had the Lamine Yamal miss where he skied it over, and then we had the Lewandowski miss in the first half. So if those two, which were the, we'll say, 8th and 9th best shots for Barcelona on target, and better than any other two that Newcastle had, then it winds up being 9-2. So I do think that it's repeatable, because if not, then Hansi Flick is going to drop into the mid block the way that we've seen him do in like the first leg against Newcastle, when he played much more conservatively, and that's what he would do, and they conceded 1 goal that way. So I think, you know, for Barcelona, it is a little bit of a give and take, where, you know, they're setting themselves up for major success, and they're setting themselves up at home to outscore you, and then on the road, expect a conservative approach, which we'll talk about the Atleti tie at the end here. But so tactically, it really wasn't much different that Barcelona did. But so some of the names that you mentioned, the things that they were trying that weren't coming off, were then working in the second half. So, like, for example, and when I said about Newcastle's grave mistake, when Lamine Yamal would come central, instead of Lewis Hall following him, because Fermin was coming out to the wing, in that man-to-man press, Lewis Hall would grab Fermin when he was in that zone to not allow him to make that run to the half space. And then because Lewandowski was dragging the other center back, whether it was Byrne or Chow, when Lamine Yamal came centrally, especially in transition, when Barcelona was in their own half, and then they would get a diagonal off from either Cubarsí or more often from Gerard Martin, those diagonals from that left side, that Lamine Yamal would come centrally. And so kind of in a moment, to keep their man-to-man press in the midfield, instead of having a midfielder drop, they would have Chow or Byrne step to Lamine Yamal. And we saw them both do this. The problem with that, with Newcastle, is now you've got about this this circle of death for them, where you've got about 10 yards of space where Lamine Yamal has a giant center back on an island in the middle of the field, and once, I believe, in the first half, and then twice in the second half, he turned on a dime, and now Newcastle are in a numerical disadvantage, backtracking towards their own goal because because Lamine Yamal had just bypassed one of their center backs. And again, what happened in that first half that wasn't really coming off was like Lewandowski would make that movement, but either his first touch wasn't on for the next ball, the wall pass. There was something that just like wasn't right. Like Cancelo's pass was a little bit behind Rafinha a few times. The Gerard Martin diagonal, it wouldn't get all the way through, or it would get broken up by the back line. So it wouldn't bypass them. And so those little things there that didn't work in the first half, Barcelona were just doing the same things. Like even Fermin's runs off of Lamine into the half space, those were then working in the second half. And then other little stuff, like, again, the 5-2, when Lewandowski scores on the header. Again, that's because Livramento came on as a sub. Livramento is not fully fit. And while he is in his mid-20s, he's a full-grown man. Lewandowski, as I said on my 5 headlines, he just grown man moved him. And he just basically grabbed him and worked him backwards and went up and won the header, right? And so, like, those are things that you don't necessarily replicate when you talk about the goals. But, like, the fourth goal, the Fermin goal, again, that was building. It's Fermin running off the center back because Lamine had dropped centrally, and then a diagonal from Gerard Martin to Rafinha, and then Fermin's in behind. And then even the 6-2, it's the Burn trying to step to Lamine Yamal, and Lamine Yamal again coming centrally. Then it's Lewandowski this time running off of the center back, that being Chow's shoulder, getting in behind. Lamine finds it, and that's the finish for the 6. So, like, those goals were coming, but they also there's a lot of times when those goals don't come off. But I said nothing really was tweaked. It's just things started to work, and when they work for Barcelona and when they work for Lamine Yamal, as I said in this game, I think for Lamine, the lows were really low. He was kind of at fault for both goals, or could take some blame for both goals. But then so many highs from Lamine yesterday were just sky high from Lamine Yamal.
And I think we're going to see more of this. See, for me, this second half was so fun because it was almost like a homage to, Rinus Michels' Futbol Total, right, from the 1970s. Like, it was, if we're talking about, like, the emphasizing of positional fluidity, the constant rotations that I was alluding to before, the collective pressing as well. And you mentioned that 6th goal. For me, it really kind of typified, if you will, the full effectiveness of Hansi Flick's system, because Lamine Yamal's, and what I said before, I think we're going to see Lamine Yamal more and more in a central position, almost like a false 10, if you will, because it made him very unpredictable, right? I think his positioning almost made him indetectable, if you will, him in between the lines there. And when Lewandowski moved to the left, like you said, it kind of created this dilemma for the defenders on whether to follow him or whether to hold their mark, hold their zone. And this created like a free lane, basically, that Barça knew how to exploit with these incisive passes and runs, which were reminiscent of, even the Guardiola days with the false 9. And, it was, like I said, it was just a very fun, entertaining second half that I hope we're going to see repeated more often, because it just worked to perfection, man. And I think if we're playing like that, yes, of course, we're going to concede goals. We know that by now. It's not a hot take anymore to talk about the high defensive line. And of course, it will remain our Achilles heel, and it will remain the narrative and a talking point for all of the pundits whenever they want to blast Barça when we are, either losing a game or whatever the result will be in the future. But it is also, it's what we're going to get with Hansi Flick. Mm-hmm. It's ride or die, This is how we want to see the Barça play. I find it hugely entertaining to watch, and I think based on the success that Hansi Flick has had in prior teams, with the Bayerns in the past, and where we come from last year as well, I do think that this is the way forward as well. We're going to just outscore our competitors, and I have full confidence in this team that we will at least take care of business against Atletico, because, we know each other by now. Maybe I'm getting too ahead of myself, but it's going to be a bit of a marathon of games between Atletico and Barça coming up next month, because we're facing each other back to back to back in La Liga and the Champions League. 2 of the games will be played away in the Wanda Metropolitano. It will all come down to how this team will approach those games. Of course, La Liga will be less significant, if you will, for Barça, given the 4 points clearance where we have at the moment with the second in the league. But how we approach that second leg in the Champions League will all come down, of course, on the result that we will be able to obtain in the first leg in the Camp Nou. And, our mentality, mental, fortitude as well, our mental strength, how we approach that game against, also an Atletico that I think is sort of peaking at the right time of the season. I'm not taking anything for granted here. I'm not taking anything away from Cholo Simeone's side, who is obviously very, very dangerous. But I'm very doubtful that we will see a repeat of the 4-0 that we saw in the Copa del Rey semifinal in the Calderon, in the Wanda Metropolitano.
Well, yeah, to your point, I think that again is the worry even about the league game, that Real Madrid, to their credit too. I mean, Real Madrid were not say hot garbage, but they did not deserve a bunch of the results that they got this season. And Real Madrid were not their best in the first half of the year, but they in the last 3 weeks have really rounded into form. And so I think, the big question, obviously, as we start to look forward, I've got some big questions based on the game we just had against Atleti. Well, to talk about all 3 of them at the same time, Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Atletico Madrid. Whichever of these 3 teams comes back from the international break, because the international break can kind of mess with that flow, mess with that consistency, and you never know if you lose a player or two. So if all 3 teams come back in the same form that they're in at the moment from the international break, then everything is up for grabs, and you've got hotly contested everything, right? And obviously Atleti.
Courtois is out for 6 weeks.
Courtois is out for 6 weeks, which could affect Real Madrid, but and that's the question for them too, right? We watched them against Man City in the Champions League, and they were definitely up to that one. But we also know when they come back to Spain, they don't always get up to them, and so they get up for the Champions League, and that's their secret sauce. And so, that'd be a question for Real Madrid. Can you, without Courtois, while the team is Champions League, let's go, let's get another one. Can you do that in the league? But to speak of Atleti, now the home leg, the first leg is at home for Barcelona at the Camp Nou.
Yeah,
and then the away leg is the second leg, because now this is kind of dumb. Atleti,
so dumb.
So Atleti took the 4th spot in the league phase from Tottenham, so they're technically the higher seed. Against Barcelona, which means why the only reason you finish top 8 is that you don't have to play in that first knockout, which I guess is reward enough. But the point is they're home for the first leg, and people are saying that's a disadvantage, and I hear you on that. But I think in this case, because these 2 teams know each other so well, there's no feeling out period. And I actually, the more I sit on it, I think it actually might be a little bit more of an advantage, because again, we just saw this reverse of this in the Copa del Rey. So if Barcelona go out and they smack them 5-2 at the Camp Nou, it's still all to play for if it's 5-2 at back in Madrid. But also it's the advantage you gain at home and can build at home for teams that know each other. Again, it's the inverse is if it's 2 teams that are feeling each other out, which Newcastle and Barcelona already played this season, but again, not really. It's been months, it's been a while. They play in different leagues, but for these 2, it's it's and they have a home. They have a league game away at Atleti the week before, and we go back to I always recommend Graham Hunter's book, Making of the Greatest Team in the World. And in that book, he talks a lot about 2011 Real Madrid and Barcelona when they saw each other, 4 times in a matter of 5 weeks or whatever it was. And in that time period, there got to a point when it was home or away, it doesn't matter. It comes down to the 2 teams kind of block all the noise out. And it really is just the battle on the field. And that little boost you get from your crowd, sure. But from match to match, it's almost a continuation of the story before. So regardless of your home and away, and that is definitely what's going to feel like for those 2.
Yeah, I guess the only counterpoint is that for the second leg, if you're playing at home, you kind of know what you have to do. You see what I'm saying? Like, I just hope that we don't see a Barça in the first leg coming out complacent, which I don't think we will. That it doesn't fit, the mold of this team. It doesn't fit their philosophy, their DNA. We know that this is a team that loves to obviously attack and score goals. So I don't think they'll be complacent when it comes to taking advantage, or at least creating the opportunities. Whether they'll hit the back of the net or not remains to be seen, of course. But I would, if I'm Hansi Flick, I'm saying, take this tie as 90 minutes and let's take care of business right here, right now at home, and try to capitalize on the opportunity that we're playing in front of our home fans, because we know the Calderon is a pressure cooker. We know the fans there are behind their team, from the first minute until the very last. It's a difficult stadium to play in. So let's not leave the task to be done, next week away, but let's take care of business here, right here now.
All right, I got some questions for you, not necessarily about that match, but some of the things to think about after yesterday's match with Newcastle.
Yeah.
For starters, Jar Martin is a player that...
You mean Gerard Maldini?
Is a player that I think I have, not to say gotten... I like everyone else, was not prepared for him to become who he's become at center back. I wasn't.
Shit.
I wasn't. Like, I still don't know how to conceptualize...
I don't think he was.
Well, right. Like, I mean, even because people are like, oh, Fermin, and they talk about him like this underdog story. And yes, you're right. He had his breakout at Linares but he was 20 years old. And like, I have, at least for him, I have the receipts. Back when he was with Cadet the U16s, I did a La Masia profile back on him, like way back in the day. And
nice.
So, like, because he was a terrific attacking midfielder. His whole thing was just like, this guy is so much tinier than every other player on the field. How is he possibly going to manage as a professional unless he grows? And you know what happened? He grew. And the talent he had grew with him. It's not like he outgrew physically, couldn't do the things he did when he was the most diminutive player on the field. And so, again, for him, at least I have the receipts of being like, yeah, he was this big talent, but he wasn't necessarily seen as having a future because of his size. And then when his size caught up, then, the talent remained. And so for him, I have the receipts. For Gerard Martin, he arrives from Cornellà B, and he's 21 years old, or he might have been 20 at the time, and then he turned 21 when he's playing with Barça Athletic. And he was one of their average players. Like, yes, he was a starter, but it was like, he's an, we'll say overage third division left back coming in to fortify the team. Okay. All the other examples of that, like right now there's Roger, and Roger is like, he's 21 or 22 years old. And so he's technically, one of the older players in Barça Athletic and there's normal starting lineup, because their regular starting lineup is 17 years old, 18 years old. So, one of the players who's 2-3 years older than the average age of everybody else on the team, with this really, really young Barça Athletic side. Gerard Martin, again, was like technically one of the overage players at 21 years old. And I just watching him, he was fine. He was defensively assured in the third division. And you go, what of that is going to possibly translate? Because even in the third division, he wasn't like, he was okay on the ball and he had a pretty decent final ball, but he didn't often get into the final third. And he's one of those interesting examples where when his teammates improved around him and they start to do things that guys don't do in the third division, or 17-year-olds don't do in the third division. Well, I said the 18-year-olds do it for Barca's first team. But, when you have the talent raises around you, the very calm, confident, consistent game that he had is translating, but also growing. And so this move to center back, which is a position he played in when he was younger, and then coaches went away from that when he went to left back. I wonder, having watched him yesterday, and I go, if you plug Inigo Martinez in for Gerard Martin into that game against Newcastle, I think you might even lose this much. I mean, I'm talking to Inigo Martinez now, the player who played for Al Nasser, right? Yeah, Al Nasser. Right?
With Cristiano, right? Yes.
Yeah, Al Nasser. Yeah. So, I mean, is Gerard Martin now having, at this point, a better season than Inigo Martinez would have had this season? That's kind of my question for you.
Wow. I mean, I think in terms of, I don't know. That's a good question, I think in terms of like the wow factor, like you said in the beginning, it's caught us all by surprise, the season that Gerard Martin is having at the moment, especially how he finished last season when he was, caught in that little, let's call it a foul, no foul call, when Dumfries took the ball away from him. I felt like he was getting criticized quite unfairly. I was curious to see how he was going to be coming back from that. Luckily, he had the summer, of course, to forget about it and get over it and hit the ground running and again, catch us all by surprise. I didn't see this coming. Before Gerard Martin moving into a center back position, I actually thought that Hansi Flick was going to use what's his name, Alvaro Cortés, of Barça Athletic, right? He just extended his contract. He hasn't made his first team debut yet. You talk about age, you talk about seasoned Barça B players. This guy's 21 years old, and
left-footed. I always forget.
Left-footed
I keep
as well.
thinking he's
Exactly.
right-footed, but no, he's left-footed. Yeah.
So I actually thought that we were going to see him being used and incorporated in the first team before Gerard Martin will get slotted into that position. When he did, it felt like it was improvised. It felt like it was like a forced move at the time, but he surpassed our expectations. Now, to say that he is performing better than an Inigo Martinez, I don't know if I can go that far, just because right now you're kind of catching me off guard. I would have to study it a bit further to make such a definitive claim, let's say. But to say that we can bank on Gerard Martin to continue to be one of the, if not the starting partner next to Pau Cubarsí, I think he's doing all the work. What more would you want from him, quite frankly?
Well, I think it's telling that Flick yesterday, and we talked about this in the tactical breakdown at halftime, that one of those options would be to give a little bit more to Lamine Yamal to allow him to move more centrally. You would have taken Cancelo from the left spot and put him over at right back, shifted Araujo over to the right center back spot, Cubarsí to the left center back, and Gerard Martin over to left back. And that's what you could have done, right? To try to deal with some of the press resistant stuff and almost hide and protect Araujo even more in the middle there with the ball at his feet. But I think, again, very correctly, when we just broke down some of the goals, having Gerard Martin being able to play those diagonals from that center position, and then Cubarsí being able to do the same thing on his right foot. And I had said on the watch along that I don't want to take, Cubarsí, you lose too much when you move him from right center back to left center back. You lose just that extra, when the ball has to move quickly to break through pressure, especially man-to-man pressure, you kind of want Cubarsí's dominant foot on that right side. And I said it through the lens of Cubarsí, but in actuality, come the second half, it was Gerard Martin's diagonals and ball playing where, he gave Pedri the relief that Pedri wasn't getting in that first half. And Pedri was able to find that space because now Gerard Martin was going to break through that midfield line. And now Newcastle had to be a bit more aware of him. Their positioning is shifted a bit, and now Pedri has those 5 yards he didn't have, or those 3. Well, for Pedri, he had those 2 yards that he didn't have in that first half. And so, if I rethink that, it was like, well, no, it's actually you want to keep Gerard Martin at left center back because of those angles. It's if we're talking about an angle game, and Cancelo, we're just going to live with whatever he does at left back, and same with Araujo. In this instance, we're not relying on our fullbacks to break through that pressure because of the man-to-man marking that Newcastle was doing to, again, it was Joelinton on Bernal and Ramsey on Pedri. And they did a pretty good job. And we also saw, of course, when Lewandowski scores that goal, it's no surprise that Tonali was sitting there, had just come off the field. And then all of a sudden, again, this is also the margin of the Champions League. One guy, it just shows you how essential that one guy can be to set up. And so Diego, this is when we're talking about one guy, there's this guy named Frankie de Jong who will be coming back. And I had said almost offhandedly, the assumption I have is that de Jong will walk back into the starting lineup and put Bernal on the bench.
Yeah.
But
not so sure anymore.
Am I just saying that? Am I just saying that because that's the expectation of de Jong's status in the team? And it's like I feel like because of social media, and this is like I'm like social media branding this. I feel like by saying that de Jong walks back, if I say de Jong doesn't walk back in, it's a disrespect to de Jong. But if I say that Bernal is going to keep his spot, that's also a disrespect to de Jong, right? It's like, or it's a disrespect to Bernal and what he's done, because it's not just about the 5 goals in 10 matches for him. It's just that, he's a big body. His rest defense is better than de Jong's. But with the ball, you do lose a little bit of something. Like, I mean, looking at the stats even from yesterday, Barcelona had, I think, less than 340 total passes, which I didn't take the time to look at this, but I'm interested to know the last time at home they had less than 400 completed passes. And it wasn't even a little bit. Like, it was 60 plus less than, or let's say even like 350. I want to know the last time that Barcelona had 350 completed passes or less at home. And that's to do with Bernal in the midfield. And obviously the man-to-man marking kind of slowing Pedri down a little bit. But Barcelona were very, very, they were very forward. They were very direct. They were willing to get vertical. And so, yes, they're at home. They were completing obviously more passes than Newcastle. That's the expectation. And they had like 60+% possession. But the point is, like, completed passes were just not the same thing. And the composure with that Pedri De Jong pivot is different with Bernal than Pedri. And I guess the bigger question is that better? And or is that something like you do at home? Like, does Bernal start at home and then De Jong starts away because of, you know, what the goals of the game are? Right? I mean, I've thrown a lot at you, but I think let me re-simplify the question because people hate when I do this. I mean, my apologies to my fan base that I ask a question and then I ramble for 4 minutes and then I ask the question again. So let me ask the question very, very distinctly. Does De Jong take Bernal's starting spot when he comes back?
My answer is no. And the reason I say that is right now, I think if you're a Hansi Flick, you're looking at the breakout of Bernal in that starting 11 and getting so comfortable, not just comfortable within the starting 11, but so good at his position as well, that I would say, okay, I'm going to base this on meritocracy. You know, whenever we have these kind of discussions about starters, deserved starters, Ivan Rakitic's words sort of echo in my brain from that time, and I'm going back quite a few years here, but where he said in an interview, he was asked about a certain player coming, the arrival of a certain player, and he said, well, I don't know what he would be doing here because I already own that position. And I'm translating here from Spanish, probably badly, but he was basically stating the point that, well, that's my position, that's my spot, and I own that spot. So what is he going to do other than just sit on the bench? Something that really struck a wrong chord with me because, again, that word meritocracy, right? So if I'm Hansi Flick and I'm welcoming back Frenkie de Jong right at the right time of the season as well, I have more depth, I have an excellent and talented player with all the experience, bags of experience, and that I know I can, you know, what I can get out of. But right now I'm saying, hey, let me see. You know, let's see how fit you are. Let's get you back to match fitness. Know that this is now una temporada muy exigente, like a very demanding phase of the season. I'm not going to force you back in a starting 11 neither right away. So let's take it little by little, see how you are in practices. But also I want to see how Bernal is going to continue to evolve, because right now, hey, I mean, this kid is the next coming of Sergio Busquets, and I don't want to stop that and stunt that evolution either. And, you know, with regards to the passes, I had to look at it myself. Here on SofaScore, they have, you know, precise passes, call it 400, 399 for Barça to call it 200 and 198 for Newcastle. So Barça doubling those precise passes. When it came to passes in the final third, actually Newcastle outpassed Barça 43-38. That's a quite telling one. And when it came to passes, where is that? Just passes overall. Yeah, you're right. 457 to 267. Obviously, we know Barça are always going to outpass their always more often than not are going to outpass their opponents
at home. Yeah,
at home. Yeah, with a 63% possession. Jesus, a bit of a tongue twister that, to the 37% for Newcastle.
Yeah, I just want to correct this. Yeah,
so what you're saying,
I can't read.
What you're saying is that those numbers would improve with Frenkie.
So I can't read. I thought it said 349. It says 399. So I'm going to work on my reading skills. But it's still less than 400 passes, which usually Barcelona.
Right. Which you're saying with Frenkie, those are boosted.
Well, at home they've averaged like 500 plus 600 passes at home.
But I guess my question would be: are like what kind of passes are we talking about?
Correct.
Are these, you know, progressive passes? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you ask about composure and you ask about when Barcelona are on the back heel in a match, like, because I will say in that match, like Barcelona still won 7-2, but there were two very distinct, we'll say, eras, and you should expect it in the Champions League, by the way. Same thing with Atletico Madrid. Like, teams are good. And I want to always remind people, the other teams are good. Some teams aren't. Like, sometimes you play teams and they're just not good, and it's 90 minutes of torture for them. But other teams are good, especially in the Champions League, and you should expect that other teams will get the momentum even at your home for a 15 to 20 minute stretch, at least once or twice in that game.
Yeah.
And Newcastle had two, like the PK for Barcelona came against the run of play. And so, like, on FOTMob, you can see the chart as to like who's kind of dominating the game and where they're dominating the game. They have that little, I don't know what to call it, like the momentum chart or whatever. And you can clearly see before Barcelona scored the PK at halftime that the momentum was in Newcastle's.
That penalty changed the game for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it was a momentum shift.
They had taken that being Newcastle momentum. So, but they had done that, by the way, not after they had scored the second goal. Like, it still took like 5-10 minutes before Newcastle started to take a little bit of control. And same thing in the first leg. Like, Barcelona controlled so many parts of that game, but there was that 15 to 20 minute stretch where it was Newcastle on the front foot. And so against good teams, you're going to just have to survive that. And I think that's the only, let's say, pro De Jong argument, that De Jong Pedri does help you kind of Can De Jong Pedri, does that take that 20 minutes of momentum shift for the other team, and does it turn it into 8? Right? Like, does it minimize, we'll say, the damage? And I also do think that Barcelona were missing in the first half De Jong's ability to dribble with the ball and to give some relief to Pedri in a man-marking system for the opposition. So I think because Bernal and De Jong are so different with their profiles, because they are, they're so different, it then puts the onus, I think, which is where we want the onus to be. It puts the onus on Hansi Flick to be the one to decide, well, I think De Jong, based on this team, is going to suit us better here, and Bernal is going to suit us better here. But yeah, I also think because Barcelona is still in the Champions League, and yeah, they don't have, I mean, there's only one match left of Copa del Rey anyway, so they got as far as they could in that competition without just the final, and still in the Liga.
But it's important because you look at the agenda.
It's important for Atleti, but I'm saying for Barca, there are also enough matches throughout the remainder of the season where, we could go, well, Bernal went 90 last time. It's time for De Jong. And I think it's also possible that we're not really thinking of those things. And I think we always do kind of minimize when you have enough of those healthy players, and if you have 15 starters, right, that we kind of minimize that injuries are always happening. So it's like, at some point, if you have the option and you have 3 starting defensive midfielders or three starting pivots, you could always start 2 or 3 of them, and it's not a big deal, because then on the weekend you're playing against whoever competition, and then Bernal starts that one because De Jong started midweek against Atleti, or or De Jong can start in the away match against Atleti in the league, and then the next week at home Bernal starts, and then and then the second leg De Jong, right? And it's like, sometimes you and I are sitting here and going, well, who is the perfect 11? Who's going to get the job done when push comes to shove? But in a 2-legged tie, 180 minutes is where it comes down to. So it's like, what role are these players going to play? Which kind of brings me to Pedri. Sorry, let's finish there.
Would you? No, but I'm sensing you're more inclined to use Frenkie maybe at the Camp Nou and Bernal in the Calderon, or what are you saying?
Flip that. I would be, but also it's like, for the De Jong also will likely not be fully fit or match fit in time for the league match. So again, it'll also come down to fitness. So if De Jong comes off the bench for that one, then I think Bernal still starts at home, and then De Jong starts, depending on how the first leg goes at home, De Jong then starts the second leg of the Champions League away at the Wanda Metropolitana. So that would be, I think that's kind of, if my gut was like, how would that set up based on fitness? That's how it would set up. Bernal would start the first 2, and then De Jong would have that return leg, I think, regardless of what the scoreline would be. Also, like, Pedri, by the way, at the moment, he was one of the only 2 guys from yesterday where I'm like, he was kind of held out of that game for a bit. And for the last 3 weeks, since Atleti in the Copa del Rey, Pedri looks tired. He looks fatigued. He looks exhausted.
Yeah.
And I would like to see for Rayo this weekend, Bernal and Costado with
For sure.
Well, sorry, in a perfect world, I'd love to see Olmo deep with Costado and Fermin in front of them in a perfect world, and rest both Bernal and Pedri. But Bernal isn't going. I don't believe he's going international duty. Well, maybe he's called up to U21s. Was he?
I haven't read up on that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I haven't double checked that. But either way, even if Bernal's with the U21, it's different than being with the full Spanish team. So
yeah,
Pedri, I don't want to see him start against Rayo regardless. So I want, if anything, it's like I'd live with Bernal, Costado, and then Olmo or Fermin, probably Olmo, and then then just don't. It's just Pedri. Let's not touch him because I think it's also a reminder too that people are like, we got to get Lamine Yamal off the field yesterday, and obviously the injuries to the Garcias didn't allow that to happen. But also, it's like Lamine looks fine. Like he looks like he could go the 90. What is coming out in the 82nd minute as opposed to coming out, then the extra 10 minutes there. Yes, it adds up over the course of a season, and more importantly, over the course of a career. But Lamine Yamal and Hansi Flick, like nobody's thinking about 29-year-old Lamine Yamal at the moment. It's not on everybody's docket. But for Pedri, he looks fatigued, looks tired. Get him off the field against Rayo. And I mean, I would also love to hold Joan Garcia out because yes, he has no injuries. That was reported by the club today. It was reported yesterday 2 to 3 weeks, and now it's 0 weeks. It's 0 matches. I still think against Rayo. Oh man,
you're gonna go with Szczesny, huh?
No, I won't. If Joan Garcia has no injuries, he also doesn't go on an international break. So I think if he's got no injuries, let Joan start. But I would love it if Szczesny just could start and you don't have to worry about it. But
what's up with the mistrust towards big tech, and not just you? It's also again,
it's not him. It's not him. It's a combination of Rayo, who is a decent pressing team, pressing Araujo and Szczesny. Because what Hansi Flick, this isn't me. What Hansi Flick does not want to do is start Szczesny and Araujo together, because that way you now have not one pressing trigger but 2 pressing triggers. And again, it's not about like me saying, because again, a lot of people after, I want you to talk about Araujo now here because I don't have the stomach for it. But and that's not, no, I'm saying I don't have the stomach to have this whole like crap fest on Araujo. I don't find that productive or necessary.
It's not productive.
So much of social media is doing. But I'm saying is like the truth is that against Rayo, even at home, Hansi Flick does not like to have 2 pressing triggers in your starting 11. 2 guys you cannot trust on the ball. I mean, the fact that you can almost trust Szczesny as much as you can trust Araujo on the ball that one's an indictment of Araujo, not a compliment to Szczesny. So, I mean, I just don't want to see those 2 in the starting lineup together. But if you don't start Araujo, if you start Xavi Aspar and don't start Araujo right back, then sure, start Tech. But if you're going to start Araujo, then Joan Garcia, take your not injured butt out there and you get the start.
Hey, I wonder if you noticed at all, and maybe I'm making too much of it, but is this the end of Ferran Torres? Are we now seeing Hansi Flick clearly favor the return of Lewandowski, even if it is a Lewandowski that is at the wrong side of 30, but clinical in these kind of games? Ferran Torres, when I saw some images of him on the bench, didn't look like he had, let's say, many friends, or didn't look like he was very pleased, let's say, to be sitting in the dugout. I wonder if this is kind of Hansi Flick saying, that's it, youngster, that's it. And if it's not, and this is something that I was expecting yesterday, which didn't obviously materialize, but Dani Olmo in the 9 or false 9 position, that didn't happen. But do you think that if you're Hansi Flick for these next, stretch of important games, are you going to just leave Ferran Torres on the bench and use Lewandowski and an Olmo before you make use of El Tiburón Vegano? Or how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. I think throughout the rest of the season, you need him. And then looking forward for next season, again, as I've said with Koundé, Ferran Torres, like, maybe one of them can be sold, and almost the same way. Like, guys with, for Ferran Torres, this is his last season of the amortization on that deal. So, like, in theory, this would be the season that you would be able to sell him. But that's not how Barcelona operates. And we know that Lewandowski is the name, right? And Barcelona, even going after a striker, like, you need goals. And so for Ferran Torres, him being on the bench here, is Hansi Flick saying, this guy is out of form And he is, when you talk about confidence, like we've known that he's worked with a psychiatrist, and he's a big confidence guy, as a lot of forwards are, and he's not confident right now, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think there's a difference between,
I think his last goal was in January.
The end of January, last week of January. Yeah. So it's like, we can't use you right now. You're not in form. You're not in confidence. But like, one, the international break could help get him right. Some training, some fitness, all those things could get him right. And he could come back in the league. Maybe not in the big matches, but it's also, again, based on the opposition. Like, against Dan Burn and against Chow, like, I didn't need to see Ferran Torres. Like, I knew that in the preview, talking to the Newcastle, like John from the Newcastle podcast, that like against those two big bodies, you need a guy who still, even his age, is elite with his wrestling with big bodies. Like, that is what Lewandowski still is, about dragging out and being physical, right? As opposed to turning and running into space. Because we saw the runs into half space came from Rafinha, it came from Fermin, and that was it. And then Lamine Yamal, it's your job to feed those two runs into the half spaces on either side, or it's an overlap on the left side from Cancelo. Those were your options coming forward, using the wings, because the middle of the park, especially with those man-to-man and those big bodies in the middle, which is like, okay, we have to win the midfield by winning the wings, right? And that was Barcelona's strategy. Against other teams, that's not going to be the case. And you can do Ferran Torres, get your movement in the box, and score one of these. Because I think with a striker like Ferran Torres, he's out of form until he scores the next one. And then he sees the ball go in the back of the net, and you can break through that. Like, Lewandowski, with what he had done even over the weekend in that start against Sevilla, right? You look at his misses against Sevilla and you're going, oh man, that guy's out of form too. Like, how could you possibly start him? And we saw how hard he pushed in the first half of those goals. And then obviously that first goal for Lewandowski was in, and then how easily that second one went in. So it's like, I think with forwards, you're on this tightrope, but there are going to be opportunities in the league, especially, or even the international break, for Ferran Torres to regain some modicum of confidence. And so, if it's Lewandowski in the Champions League because you're against, well, it's Atleti, so that's, but like, let's say, hypothetically, I don't want to speak this, I'm trying to speak this into existence. You get by Atleti, and now it's time for Arsenal. You start Lewandowski against Arsenal, right? Like, it is, once again, you go back to being, who is the personnel for the other team, and who's the best player to start in that circumstance in this big match. So you start the guy who's best in that circumstance. And with 3 matches against Atleti, I mean, Ferran Torres might start one of them. Like, he might start the League One on the road, where you're going to try to take advantage of some of that space that Atleti is going to allow you. And you also look at the profiles that Atleti are going to have in their starting lineup with their center backs. It's like, you do trust Ferran Torres a little bit more. I mean, for as good as Pubiol and Hansko have been, like, Pubiol made a mistake. I mean, you look at what Pubiol and Hansko did in that home leg against Barcelona, in the Copa del Rey with the 3-0. So it's like, there are windows there for Ferran Torres. I think he'll get his chance. And we also keep hearing the rumblings that Dani Olmo was going to play the false 9, and yet he still doesn't, right? So it's like, I think Hansi Flick just kind of has that ace up his sleeve as a threat, but in truth, it's going to be Ferran Torres and Lewandowski to ride out the end of the season. And also a reminder that Lewandowski can't start the rest of these games, the rest of the season. He can't. Like, he looked fatigued in moments, and if not for scoring that first goal, I think he comes out of that game earlier. But that first goal absolutely galvanized him and made him 25 again, right? Because he was just like, I'm off I got my goal. Now I'm happy again.
Beautiful setup as well. I mean, give credit to Lamine. Yeah. I mean, Lewandowski's role certainly has evolved beyond like the traditional striker that he's always been. Acting more as a, like I said before, right, a decoy, a space creator, and allowing more dynamic attacking options. And I really liked, again, to kind of regurgitate the point from earlier as well, Lamine Yamal demonstrating his excellent and exceptional, the versatility, right? We know that he is creative, but seeing him also being capable of not just playing wide, but cutting inside, and him, in fact, filling in that false 9 role, I think is very, very interesting. And I would like to see him more actually being active in the middle. I think he can be very, very productive, not just on a assisting end, but actually him scoring as well, a lot more goals.
Yeah, I mean, Barcelona, as much as we just talked about Lewandowski and Ferran Torres, they kind of live or die by, as we've as I can go back to the big four of Lamine Yamal, Pedri, Garcia, and Rafinha. Like the big four, when they're healthy together, Barcelona have a shot. And then again, what Bernal's added has been incredible. What Gerard Martin has added has been incredible. Joan Garcia in net, obviously, is just such an upgrade this season. And yeah, it's funny because 8-3 on aggregate and a 7-2 yesterday. It feels like, how do I say this? You and I talked right after the 3-0 second leg in the Copa del Rey. I actually had more confidence after that one than I do even this one, because I feel like we can kind of pinpoint where Newcastle kind of fell apart and it all kind of went haywire. Whereas the 3-0 against Atleti, I go, they could replicate that, and that can happen again and again. Like with the 7-2, just again, it feels like it got away from Newcastle quite a bit there, and it wasn't like
for sure
90 solid minutes from Barcelona, but they capitalized on the moments they had to, even despite having some misses in that game. All right, Diego, I will give you the last word here. So as we kind of wrap this show up, any other thoughts that I missed?
I think we really touched upon all aspects. The last one, I guess, was we can all breathe a sigh of relief that Joan Garcia and Eric Garcia, for that matter, aren't injured and will be back and are available for action for this next upcoming La Liga commitment against Rayo, which, by the way, I don't want to take anything away from, because despite the fact that the Champions League, of course, excites us the most, we all want to reconquer that beautiful trophy, as Messi quoted once, to have that once again, be crowned ours. And after these long 10, 11 years, however long it's been. But La Liga is, if not more important, we have to repeat success. We have to defend our championship status in La Liga, because that would not just crown us, back-to-back winners of La Liga, but Dan, you'll probably know better than me. I think that's like 7 La Liga titles in the last 11 years or so.
That's right.
Or so.
Yeah.
It's a dominance that, again, shouldn't be underestimated, particularly given the times, we're living in a post-Messi era. So to repeat domestic success in La Liga is of utmost importance. And Rayo's coming to town that, yes, is always stronger in Vallecas, for sure, but they're going to be a tough nut to crack. And I just hope that everybody is going to be, not just guns blazing, but mentally focused and concentrated at the task at hand, and not get too distracted by the, whether it's the upcoming clash in the Champions League or the international break, which sometimes tend to kind of stunt the momentum as well. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, I think we're firing all cylinders heading into the international break. So, Diego, you and I are going to have to, we don't take a break though. So that's a good thing for us. So there's no break for the international break. There may be no matches. We take I take a week and a half or 2 week break from the watch alongs, but the content machine continues. It's always hungry. The matches may stop.
It is. You got to feed that machine. You do a good job. Like I said, I'm very impressed with your dedication to do these watch-alongs as well. I can't find the consistency to do it. I always have like some family commitments, someone coming, going, me having... But to do that consistently is... I take nothing away from your effort, man. It's admirable.
I would say one of the things that helps me is I have like a 48 resting heart rate. So it allows me to, and I've seen you and you react, and for me, I'm generally a cool customer throughout, regardless of how many goals or what happens. So I think that kind of helps me. And also, again, my community over there has been so helpful too. Again, shout out to Encore and T-Men's, like being able to have other people come in and talk to me too.
For sure.
Just talk to myself.
By the way,
for 2 hours is a little maddening. Like
it is.
When I finish, and then I go right away and I record the 5 headlines right afterwards. Like I write them and then I record them. And so like my partner she can attest. Like there's a moment where I just go, oh, and like you could see like the show, the show is over, and then I just like you have that moment where you just kind of decompress.
Decompress.
Time to edit, and then I mean that's kind of what you do. And again, I also am a broadcaster. I mean, so are you. Like you're a broadcaster, you do other work in front of camera. So I mean, you know what it is. There's this. You get up to it. You bring that energy, and then when the camera goes off, you kind of like, you go back to go into your shell again.
Totally. Yeah, but it's like, again, lives and these kind of long hours of streaming isn't easy. I was reminded again of I did 5 hours for the presidential election because I was, waiting for the Laporta acceptance speech, and which was never coming. and once he did the speech, it was so short because he had commitments with other medios de comunicación, other like media outlets, that I was like, okay, I might as well stick around because that speech was lacking so much in depth, and it wasn't very profound. So I was like, okay, well, let's just keep streaming. But it was exhausting, and then I was translating on the trot. But by the way, that's what I wanted to ask you. You're happy with the results?
Laporta. I mean, I said it in my top 5 the other day that like I don't really back a candidate. What I'm happiest about is that democracy is a part of the club, and it continues to be that way.
Definitely.
And I said this months ago, even like the mandates of the president, for better or worse, are based on success. So once he won the domestic treble last season, and with the success that Hansi Flick has, and the way that Hansi Flick, has been his guy, he was never going to lose election. The question was by how much. And I think Victor Font probably, if he wasn't so adversarial, like if he had just kind of tried, because the first time he ran, but last election he ran with a lot of information. Here's my plan,
correct,
and all these things. And I think he built that name recognition. So now he's kind of been in the consciousness for the last 4 years. And instead of kind of reiterating and doing the same thing, he got a bit more adversarial this time and kind of made it politics.
Couldn't agree more.
And so I kind of felt like with that approach, he took the wrong approach. Again, I'm not like, politics 101, but I think he took the wrong approach. And so when I saw the numbers, was it 28% to 27%, something like that, 28%, whatever it was. But he would like...
Yeah, Laporta was like basically like 68.8. It was like 69% to...
Yeah, and so, looking at those numbers, it's like, I was kind of not surprised that Laporta ran away with it. And then for your audience, my final thought, and I want to go back to the list that I actually wrote the other day. Like Laporta's mandate is going to be interesting because, again, and this is often the case with presidents of governments or whatever, their legacies aren't built on the time that they're in office. They're built on the decisions that are long lasting after the fact, that don't get tied to them, get tied to a future candidate. So it's like, there's whoever comes next, whatever man or woman comes next to for Laporta, because again, this is his second term, so he can't run again. But the long-term deals with Nike, Goldman Sachs, the VIP seats, there are little things here like the levers, the libero payments. You hope that through his second campaign, those things are all just kind of put to bed and finished. But the risk and reward of the levers, the risk and reward of continuing to push forward with the stadium. But then you hear the financial reports from his team and the board, which you kind of believe them, that they needed, what is it? It was the stadium was earning 250 million, but based on budget, it needed to generate between 450 million in revenue. So they had to do the stadium now to make up for the COVID losses. So, it's for Laporta's first term, it was how was he going to approach the post-COVID era? And yes, he took risks, but it looks like because he also I like that you call it post-COVID and not the post-Bartomeu era. Well, right. Well, because regardless of who the president was going to be, the post-COVID era was going to affect their books. Now, because Bartomeu made choices that exacerbated some of those issues and those decisions he made, sure. But yes, in the post-COVID era, there were risks that he took that, again, Font, when you saw his plan last time around, wasn't going to take those similar risks. But he also, again, lucked out to, if you want to call it this golden generation, this very marketable generation of Lamine Yamal. And Kubarsi doesn't sell the same number of jerseys, but these young players, there were 4 players for 28 minutes who were born in 2007, Diego. And they were on the field at the same time in a Champions League round of 16 match against a big EPL side. 4 guys from 07 were playing at the same time in that one. And so it shows you the future is bright, and Laporta did kind of luck into that. But all that said, like the risk of the levers seems to be that it might pay off for him. And again, you look at the Goldman Sachs stuff, Nike, if he can make sure that Goldman Sachs just remains merely investors and don't ever get a future stake in the club, then Laporta again will be galvanized. And it's funny you asked me this because you're there, like you're in Catalonia. Like if anything, you have a better pulse of the voting population, especially the older, I actually had on the channel this morning coming out, I came out with something about FC Barcelona and its Catalan roots, like a reminder that the socios are still largely like based in Catalonia and are like older Catalan people. So the politics of the identity of the voter base is different than the global voter base. And as much as I've done my part and my work in understanding the mind of a 65-year-old Catalan man, like I've really done as much as I could to put myself in his shoes. His, like, the idea of like a single voter issue and what they vote for and what they choose to vote for, it's a little bit different than the conversations that are being had on social media with the global fan base.
For sure. And I mean, it's you could even boil it down to a 65-year-old man living around the Corts. Like, it is that, geographically, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it's very,
Cerca de,
the word escapes me right now, but it's the socios basically, especially because, and that is a criticism I think that is well placed, especially in 2026, the fact that the electronic votes were not made available this time around definitely, probably hindered not so much the outcome, but the amount of people that could merely vote. I followed the whole day, and you saw people driving up from Andalusia. They came from all around, not just Spain, but even Europe, people flying in from Germany to cast their votes. So those that really wanted to vote made the effort. But I think, given the digital age that we're living in at the moment, you have to make advantage of, you have to just allow as many ways. You have to facilitate the ways that people can vote, right? I think that makes a lot of sense. But it was never going to be any doubt in my mind that it was going to be Laporta. I actually had a chance to work directly for Font's campaign. They called me several times, and I have a very good friend that was part of Camp Rubí's campaign, where I also got the offer to participate in that. But my heart was so dead set on voting for, I call them sort of the lesser of the evils. I don't think, like, I'm not a Laportista by any stretch of the imagination, at least not this time around. I am a Barcelonista, though. And given the fact that I wanted what was best for my club, I knew that right now you just can't touch what Laporta is doing. You have to give it more time. And it's not so much giving Laporta more time, it's giving Hansi Flick more time. Like, Hansi Flick is really the one that won these elections. And I don't think that Laporta has done everything as bad as the Fonts and the other presidential, or let's say his opposition make it out to be. I think that he could have done things better. There's clearly nepotism. He's guilty of several things within the club. To
be clear, though, that's also been my criticism of Laporta. But again, that also is not disqualifying, because my view of Laporta is that, yes, he's a bit of he can be like a bit of a rhinoceros sometimes, or feeling with certain things, like full charge ahead. And yes, there's some nepotism stuff there, but I have never throughout his presidency believed that he doesn't want the best for the club and makes choices, whether or not they're the right choices down the road or his legacy. But I do still always believe that he wants the best for the club, and that makes him a great candidate. I mean, I think all the candidates want the best for the club, but his approach to it and his magnanimous figure that he might be in negotiations, and again, a guy who battles for the club and the club's identity in the Spanish media, even, not that it matters, but like the fact that
no, it matters.
I mean, right. And then even his approach to do the thing to upset La Liga, then apologize later and work it out later. Like, is it frustrating? Yes. Is it effective? Mostly, actually.
Or use Florentino Perez,
exactly,
and then stab him in the back.
So yeah, like, is it how I would do it? No, but does it work for Barcelona? Does it work for club? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And that's why he's the president. So
right.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I think in the end, the better candidate won. We want some stability. Again, a reason why I think winning La Liga is so important, just to give that continuity and stability to this project, to this current project, and allow us to continue to build. And as you said before, with this golden generation of youngsters, I think we're just so well positioned for más y mejor, bigger and better success down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I've said too, people getting stuck in the one-to-one stuff. I mean, again, you and I have been covering this club long enough to know that getting back into the Camp Nou and the amount of gate revenue, it's so boring, but it's true. Like the gate revenue returning and getting back to that Camp Nou and extending the stadium again, like Barcelona's financial problems are going to disappear in the next 5 years. Like I don't think Laporta, as hard as he might, I mean, he obviously is not trying to do this, but even if he tried to get Barcelona in trouble, like they would have to make quite a few Coutinho, Griezmann, then a pandemic mistakes again to get in trouble because the stadium.
Let's knock on wood.
Well,
let's not jinx anything there.
Well, I mean, I don't think but that's the thing about democracy. I don't think the socialists would let that happen again.
Yeah.
Like, I think it would be almost a full blown revolt if he said, you know, hey, we have an option for Harry Kane, but he's going to cost 200 million. I think the fans would have to. I mean, I think the fans would revolt. So that, so yeah, I think the socios and Laporta again is really. No offense to there is some offense to Bartomeu. I think Bartomeu at some point did find a way to kind of distance himself from the voice of the socios and said, I have my camp, I have my voting base, so I'm kind of
very out of touch.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think Laporta he cares about public perception a little bit more than I think Bartomeu did. And so I think he does kind of go with the ebbs and flows of like, well, who does the fan base want? Like, are they willing to spend this much for Julian Alvarez? Like, I know it says Laporta's camp wants Julian Alvarez, but the numbers that are already being floated out there, I think when push comes to shove, like that's going to be probably thrown out because Laporta's going to go, I think the fan base, even though he's not going to be reelected, he's like, I don't want the newspapers that are favorable to me now to be mad at me for a year and a half, right? Like, or two, whatever, the rest of his mandate is now 5 years. So it's like for the last 2.5, 3 years, I don't want to be yelled at by the by the newspapers and become this this villain. I think it matters to him that his legacy for FC Barcelona as president is like one of the ones you remember. Because again, going through the history, so many of them don't get even second even second elections. But then too, like I bet on your stream you're talking about like Nunez, which is interesting because Nunez was there for a long time, and yet
longest seated,
and yet because of the mutiny and all those things, it's like, do we really remember his presidency is remembered as something that is very hot and cold. Like again, the mutiny of the team, how things ended with Bernd Schuster, but then of course he has Cruyff, but then like it wasn't always great with Cruyff, and so
ended terrible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think his mandate, that being Nunez, is like he did so much great for the club, and he was there for so long, and yet the negatives to some people definitely outweigh the positives, and then for vice versa, you're like, well, he was there for a long time. He did a lot of good, and he put Barcelona in a situation to succeed with Cruyff and all that stuff. But then again, it ends the way it ends. And Laporta, I think, just wants to be like, hey, when you talk about the best presidents, I hope you bring me up because I was there for 4 terms, and it went pretty gosh darn good for a while. So
listen, took us out of our two of our darkest eras in our history, the post-Gaspar and the post-Bartomeu, and made us see the light again. So I think he deserves ever so much credit for that. He's a man that knows how to surround himself with the right people, and for all the criticism as well that Alejandro Echeverria gets for being this mysterious right-hand man that works in the shadows and doesn't have an official position within the board, which I think is, you can criticize that. But also on the flip side, the reality is that he is someone who knows how to be close to the players. The players have, trust their lives with this man. And you go down the line, it's not just the current squad from Rafinha to Pedri to the youngsters, but even a Xavi Hernandez was like this with Alejandro Echeverria, even though now they are, enemies, for lack of a better word, and Xavi Hernandez feels betrayed by Echeverria. The fact is that he is somebody that he's just a pivotal figure in this whole organogram, like this whole setup at the moment.
And we don't have time to talk about this again. This is it. We've already gone over time, but it was interesting when the narratives as the EPL teams who were dominating the previous round of the Champions League. Yeah, one of the conversation points that was really interesting, or I almost want to call it an excuse from some of the EPL fans, were saying that Barcelona's locker room, because through the La Masia stuff and the way that the club is run, they're so much tighter knit than a lot of these EPL teams, which do kind of come off as being these kind of mercenary, big money, this guy, okay, if that guy doesn't work out, then we bring in another guy. And it's like the EPL teams are so deep and everybody's fighting for their next contract and their next meal. Well, I mean, big money meal, but they're fighting for their next big money meal that there is no like it's hard for them to root for the guy who's in their position, because if you don't take his spot, you're gone from that club anyway. So there's no continuity. Whereas for Barcelona, for better or worse, again, they didn't have the money. Again, this worked out for Barca. They didn't have the money to be like, well, we don't love like last season, like, oh, Ferran Torres, he got cold again, so we know, we're going to replace him in the offseason. Or Koundé, throughout the first half of this season, struggled for form, so they're definitely going to bring in a new right back, and Koundé's out. Like, it's just like these guys have had the opportunity to fail and fail for, like Araujo would have been gone 3 times before if he was playing for an EPL team, right? But that locker room gets to stay tight because over the course of a season, with the financial issues that Barca have, they're going to need everybody, including the academy kids. So, Lewandowski, I know they're less than half your age, but and he reportedly has been always on board to be like, these kids, we need these kids, because I've seen, his Bayern squads are deeper than the one they have now at Barcelona. And he knows that, we need 18-year-old Xavi Aspar for, now we're going to see at least 5 or 6 quality appearances in big moments. If Barcelona are going to win the Liga, they're going to need 18-year-old Xavi Aspar, which is, again, a good thing. That's a positive of the club. So I'm happy about it. Congratulations to Joan Laporta, and hopefully, Diego, you and I are still working and still doing this thing when the next. Well, actually, by this point, we're going to be still talking, doing this podcast by the time the mandate is over, and we can talk about the next election. So, all right, Diego, that's it. We've had enough. All right, I'll give you the final. I'll give you the outro. I usually do it, so you do the outro this time.
All right, buddy. Yeah, well, listen, once again, a jam-packed podcast. Make sure all of you tuning in, watching, or listening, that you give us a big like, a big follow, share it with your loved ones, your friends, and make sure that you comment as well. Feed that algorithm so that everybody knows that this is the spot for Barça fans, for the Barcelona pod, or D spot, wherever you're listening. You found your home here for all things Barça. So thank you ever so much for tuning in. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you in the next one.